Hi, everybody. Tom Woods here. I have had, over the past 6 months, at least several professors as guests who have, and probably actually the past 2 months, come to think of it, who've had one run-in or another with the campus thought police, and we've talked about what happened and how they dealt with it, and I find these human interest stories quite interesting and important. But today I want to talk to somebody who's not a professor, but who nevertheless is seeing the situation up close. So we're bringing back Tom Ciccotta, who's been on in the past. Tom is president of the Bucknell College Libertarians. He also writes about social justice and libertarian issues for Breitbart News, and I thought I would get his thoughts on what we ought to be doing and what he's seeing, and good questions like that. Tom, welcome back.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for having me back. What is social justice? I was trying to just define it for myself briefly and succinctly. And what I came up with was what it really boils down to, I think, in my experience, is it's an ideology that suggests that society is broken down into two classes, the oppressed and the oppressors. And you're either in one of these two categories, and that's the way they view everything. Every minor social interaction. We talk about, I'm sure you've talked about microaggressions on the show. Minor social interactions. Everything is judged through that sociological lens of oppressor and oppressed. So if you're on a college campus and you are in the majority, or if you're a white male, you're an oppressor. You're kind of like I also like to use the words predator and prey, instead. So you're a predator. If you're a white male, doesn't matter what really who you are. You're a predator, and it's kind of like this 4-year anti-white, anti-male, anti-heterosexual guilt trip, because you're constantly being told that you're kind of responsible for some of the worst aspects of society. So engaging with that and engaging with where they're coming from is the first step in fighting back. Really, I know a lot of people would choose it. We're just going to demonize them off the bat, and they're crazy, and a lot of them are crazy, and it's radical. But it's really important to really get inside their heads and think about where they're coming from. I listened to the show, one of the more previous episodes with Cassie J, and she did that Red Pill documentary, and that's fascinating to me, because there are some legitimate, as she brought up, men's right issues that go completely ignored, and not accidentally ignored, intentionally ignored, because because men are predators. They're predators in the social justice worldview, so their issues aren't relevant. So really thinking about it is the first step. That's really the first thing you have to do if you're going to take on these people.
All right, so give me an example, if not drawn from real life, then at least how you might want that kind of strategy to proceed. What would be some way, some in that we could get with people like this to get them talking and get them thinking? Now, personally, I am skeptical of that approach. I'll just tell you right off the bat. These don't strike me, by and large, as people who want to have rational discussions. They don't believe you even have a point of view. They're not interested in sitting down with a Trump supporter to figure out, I wonder what would make somebody vote this way. It's all racism, racism, racism. Everything's racism. You can't even talk rationally about anything. But I'll leave that aside for a minute. I'll try and be a good sport here. What would you suggest as an entry point?
Well, it's a little bit easier if you're like I'm most of this, and in my circle it's mostly conservatives, but if you're a young libertarian and you can kind of find common ground with someone on the social justice left, let's say you hop in on gay marriage or decriminalizing drugs, something like that, somewhere you can find common ground. I am unlike a lot of my peers in that I believe I don't think mocking them, making fun of them is all that successful, even though sometimes it's necessary to make fun of people who are crazy and ridiculous. I think if you can kill them with kindness and try to find some common ground, that to me is when I found you can maybe break through to some of these radical social justice warriors and try to work with them a little bit. But it's it's a very difficult thing to do, because to them you're the devil. Like if you don't follow the progressive orthodoxy to a T, you're you're everything that's wrong with society. So it's a big commitment to try to be kind to these people, to really try to find common ground with them, because they're not going to like you. It's part of the way they operate, whether they're doing it intentionally or not. Demonizing the people they disagree with is part of the strategy. I think it's part of Someone decided at some point that, and people, it's like a cliche now to suggest that Saul Alinsky was the person who did it, but demonizing the people you disagree with, suggesting they're of a lower moral character is part of the strategy, I think. So that makes it more difficult. But like I said, if you understand these things going in, it becomes a little bit easier.
All right. Are you observing any of this at Bucknell where you are?
Well, Bucknell is a small liberal arts school, so it is tainted by some of these things. And the thing that I always say is that the radicals on the left are far more mainstream and influential than the radicals on the right, I think. And people have fought me on that one, but I genuinely believe that, because I think the social justice left is a minority even on the radical college campuses or the very progressive college campuses. The problem is that they're very influential. Like they're very influential. Their strategies work. They have resources. They have connections with certain faculty members. They have a lot of pull. The media will always give them attention. Their issues are, So when they do the trigger warning stuff, when they do the microaggression stuff, the administration is usually sympathetic to the things that the most radical campus leftists want, which is tough. That makes it a little bit more difficult. But that's also a good thing, because I don't like to overblow it. And people say, is this, when you see these crazy stories, we read these crazy headlines about, one of my favorites from 2016 was when the kids at Emory had a meltdown because somebody wrote Trump 2016 in chalk on the sidewalk. That was one of my favorite stories. I think it would be unfair to suggest that that's all liberals on college campuses. I think it's a minority. Unfortunately, when those students act out that way, in a lot of cases, the administrations don't put their foot down. They kind of cave and give in to the demands of the loud and vocal minority. We saw what happened here's a perfect example. What happened at the University of Missouri last year, where we had these crazy protests in response to a couple of racial incidents, some of which I think were legitimate, others of which turned out to be hoaxes. That small group of students, that's small relative to the size of the University of Missouri, had an incredible amount of influence and actually really damaged the enrollment at the University of Missouri because of all of the press, all of the controversial press that the university received as a result. But that's the perfect example, because that was probably a protest group of maybe 100 students at a huge state university. But they shook that place to its core, for better or for worse, and really changed everything about the University of Missouri. That was everything that was going on at University of Missouri was their protest. A small group of radical students with radical ideologies on race and radical ideologies on gender, and they changed everything. So I think understanding the scale, the scale of the amount of these people is also important too, because your average college Democrats president is not I would say not a social justice warrior. I've met a lot of college Democrats who are not social justice warriors, and those are the ones we should be praising. We should go out of our way as conservatives and libertarians to say these are the good ones.
Well, Tom, you have worked closely with MILO, who is known for being provocative on college campuses, and he's not known for saying, "Let me sit down and try and think about what might be motivating the people who are against me."
Yeah.
But that's not what he's known for. He's known for being confrontational, in your face, take no prisoners. So do you think he's doing it wrong?
No, well, you know what? I get that a lot, because I go out with the let's try to be friends attitude. And people will say, how could you possibly have that attitude when your boss, I co-hosted when I was co-hosting the podcast. We were partners on the podcast. How could you work with MILO and also have the let's be friends with the social justice warriors attitude? I think you can have both, and here's why. I think the reason, the purpose MILO serves is that he comes to these campuses, which the social justice warriors, the small groups of they bully everybody into kind of like omission and silence. And he comes in and he just breaks he completely destroys the environment and says, if you're a conservative or libertarian, it's okay to fight back against it. He goes so far and he's so provocative that I think the conversations that I want to have, these friendly conversations where you find middle ground, can happen as a result of him coming and kind of swaying, changing getting rid of the imbalances in the ideological discussions on campuses. He comes in and says, it's incredible to me how many students I've spoken with who say, I wasn't going to speak up on my college campus until MILO came and kind of told me that it was okay. Like, by his outrageous behavior, by his provocative, performance at my university, he opened a window for conservative libertarian students to finally say things. Now, I don't think it would be productive if every student who saw MILO decided to behave like him in all of their interactions with social justice warriors. I hope that he is a catalyst, and I think he has been in a lot of ways. It certainly was for me when I brought him to my university. I had a lot of really calm, genuine one-on-ones with people because of the window that he opened for discussion. And I don't think that window would have been opened if he wasn't so provocative.